This episode is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the #1 seller of games and gaming accessories. And GatheringMagic.com, the #1 resource for Magic the Gathering news and articles.
Hi, my name's Sean, and this is my Rhys the Redeemed deck. So today we're going to be looking at my Rhys the Redeemed deck. Start off, of course, with the commander here, Rhys or Rhys. Really, however you pronounce it is fine. Both of his abilities pretty relevant. Obviously, you're going to use the first ability a lot more than you use the second. I like Rhys because he's a casual commander. Really lets you follow the spirit of EDH. You know, you can either make creatures or make a ton of creatures. So you're just a lot of fun to play. Not an abusive deck, when I can play with groups and all kinds. Alright, and so now, before we get to the basic lands, I'm actually going to go over the basis of the deck, which is these two enchantments, Parallel Lives and Doubling Season. Both of them let you double the amount of tokens you put into play, so there will be a lot of token producers. Rhys himself is a pretty big token producer, so something that doubles his first ability or doubles his second ability is absolutely amazing. Parallel Lives, obviously the worst of the two enchantments, but still fun to have a second Doubling Season printed. Doubling Season, obviously a ton of fun, so many uses. Unlike Parallel Lives, it also doubles the number of counters on basically any permanent you have. So any sort of planeswalkers, any quests, anything that uses charge counters, they're all just great with it. Really can't say enough about this card. This is a card that really, in my mind, embraces the spirit of the casual environment. It's one of the only cards that maintains a high value with absolutely no tournament play whatsoever. And really love it. I'm glad to have it. I'm glad to have a deck that finally uses it. As we go through the basic lands in the deck, like I say, I like to play a decent number of basics in any deck. Unless you're playing some sort of Hermit Druid shenanigans, which I am not. Basics are important, you know. They stop you from getting hosed by any sort of ruination effect. They come into play untapped, they produce colored mana. You know, I'm all for utility lands, but only after you've covered your bases with these utilities. So, obviously the only two basics that you're going to see in this deck are Forest and Plains. It's mostly an elf tribal deck outside of the few token producers and things that are in here. So I wanted a lot more green than I have white, so you're going to see there's a lot more basic forests than there are basic plains. So just go through this real quick. Alright, so we get into the non-basics here. My primary goal for non-basics is color fixing, so Terramorphic Expanse is good. Searches up either of those basics, which I have plenty of. Another good reason to play basics is the M10 lands and the Innistrad lands. Come into play untapped if you have them. Obviously a great land. If you're playing any fetch lands, you can go find it. What Elves can go get it. Not in this particular deck, but just having a forest / plains seems effective. I like man lands, especially man lands that fix your mana. You do kill people with them every now and then. One of the big weaknesses of this deck is Wrath of God, so man lands help get around that weakness a little bit. We have just some basic mana producers here. You just saw Razorverge Thicket, now we have Brushland. Of course we have the Shadowmoor filter lands. They're pretty good. You want to make sure you have color producing lands to get there. Windbrisk Heights, definitely the hideaway land for this deck. Really easy to get out 3 creatures, so becomes a very cheap spell. Hopefully we can get something big under it. At worst it's a mana producer, you know, throws out an extra land. Then we have Treetop Village. As I said, manlands are fun to have, good to have in the deck. Alright, so here we go. Here's a land that goes along with the theme deck. We got lots of little creatures and counters, so Doubling Season likes this doubly, you know. Produces twice as many counters, tap this. Puts twice as many counters on the double tokens you created. Then we have my favorite Innistrad land. Not just in this deck, I've played this all over Commander. Really like it. Lets me get around some of the more controlling decks that are trying to counter my spells. I can just put counters on my man lands or put counters in the little dorks I put out early. So Gavony Township, fun to have. Then we have Kor Haven, pretty good. Not quite Mystifying Maze, not quite Maze of Ith. Kor Haven, still a very good land. I found a lot of usefulness for it. It's fit well into my decks. On the Elf Tribal theme, Wirewood Lodge, I have a few of the tap for the number of elves in play, so being able to untap an elf is good. Also just being able to untap Rhys to put out a few more tokens, always fun to do. This is my one land destruction land, not a true land destruction. I wanted to say casual, so I didn't want to use a Strip Miner Wasteland here, simply because they actually take a land away forever, but I'm fine with getting rid of some of these guys' Cradle. They can have a forest, I just don't want them to keep that around forever. And of course, my favorite manland, because it's a tribal manland, Mutavault, lots of fun to play with. Gets big as the game goes on, can carry things later on, for the few equipment that's in the deck. Alright, now we're moving on to our elves. You know, elves are fun. They make it so you don't have to play things like Kadama's Reach or other mana accelerations in the deck, because you can play with the one-drop elves. That's, of course, Llanowar Elves, the classic elf. And then we have Arbor Elf. Not quite Llanowar Elf, you really do have to have a forest out, another good reason to have all those basic forests. Joraga Treespeaker, this one's actually real fun. If you focus on mana ramping and putting counters on this, again with Doubling Season, putting the counters on it's very quick. All of a sudden, Rhys's tokens that he brings into play are a lot better for you. You know, you can ramp up into big spells if you get this guy to the ultimate. This is the only deck I've actually actively tried to get to the ultimate on Joraga. Now this is the easy way out for it. Making the tokens into mana producers. Heritage Druid, much easier to get online than Treespeaker. Lets you get past arrest effects on Rhys. And we have Elvish Visionary, a little card draw, and an elf. Alright, and on the same grounds as Visionary, for cantrips, we have Sylvan Ranger. Sylvan Ranger is just nice, gets another card in hand, doesn't ramp you mana, but can fix mana. Oh, and this guy's actually one of my favorites. It is actually an elf, and as a turn 2 play, really good because it's always going to tap for 2 mana, because Rhys will generally be your turn 1 play. So it's good to have something that taps for 2 mana for 2. Not quite as good as it is in 5-color decks or in 3-color decks, but I still like it. Elvish Harbinger, obviously. Elf Tutor is always good, and taps for any mana, so fun to have in an elf deck. Oracle of Mul Daya, another good elf. Wasn't played in a lot of elf tribal decks, but in this case it's good. There's actually a combination item here that goes with Oracle of Mul Daya. It doesn't win the game, but it is fun to get online. Then we have Wirewood Channeler. This guy's nice as an elf because he can actually create white mana, so if for whatever reason I'm only drawing my green sources, I can actually get out of it with this. So that is nice. Moving on into our elf lords, here's our cheap elf lord. Sometimes I will actually only cast him for 1 if I have an Orin Reef on board, just because, you know, a 2 mana cost lord, fun to have. And here we go, this one's a great one. Because there's so many ways to put +1/+1 counters on creatures, this guy basically gives all my deck trample, which is great. It's also important to note that Rhys produces green-white warrior elf tokens, not just 1/1 green elf tokens, and so this guy does put counters on them. So, very good. 2 mana cost lords, as I said, always great to have. There is a lot of green in my meta, so Elvish Champion will help me get through, makes a lot of things unblockable. Sure, it makes a few of the elves that other people play unblockable, but I generally play more elves than other people, so I get more of a benefit out of it. Then, of course, the daddy of the lords, Elvish Archdruid. Really hard to find something wrong with him. You know, gives all your elves +1/+1, taps for the amount of elves in play. Great mana producer, part of one of my only infinite combos in the deck, so he's good to have. Imperious Perfect. You know, puts tokens out, boosts elves, does exactly what this deck wants to do. And then Uzuri. This is my overrun for the deck. Obviously, playing enough elves is great. Third Generate always catches people off guard. So, Uzuri is just great. He is one of the main win conditions of the deck, is just getting this guy out and rushing at people with elves. And here's one of the other win conditions. Mirror Entity is an elf. He's everything, and he makes all your creatures everything. So all those boosts that elves get, Mirror Entity is going to let even your non-elf creatures get it. It's going to make your elves go from 1/1s to however many lands you have in play. He's just a powerhouse. There's a slight combo in here, but it doesn't win the game with him. He's really here to be my elf lord, because you need a white elf lord if you're going to have so many green elf lords. You can't be racist about it. And then, of course, you have the Huntmaster. Putting elf tokens into play is good. I was questioning this because I don't play Curio or any sort of cute effects like that in the deck. But, I like putting tokens into play, so there she is. Talking about like putting tokens into play, we've got one of our first non-elf, the Hero of Bladehold. Obviously, with doubling Season or Parallel Lives, she gets absurd very quickly. She also bumps all your elves, so she's a pseudo-lord in herself. She may not be an elf by name, but Mirror Entity can always fix that. And then Juniper Order Ranger. This guy's dangerous. With the number of tokens that come out and his ability, they can stack, so you can put 2 tokens into play instead of 1 with doubling season. Give this guy, 4 +1/+1 counters in each token, 2 +1/+1 counters. He's just a powerhouse. People don't play him nearly as much as they should. But talk about a card people know about. Elesh Norn. Yeah, she's gross in most decks. Probably one of the best cards in the deck. Just beefing up all your stuff and killing off a lot of the trouble generals just by being in play. An amazing, amazing card. Talking about amazing cards, Seedborn Muse with Rhys is not an infinite combo, but it's just amazing on its own. Untapping all your mana, all your lands each turn means that Rhys will start by putting 1 token out each turn and will quickly shift to that doubling your tokens, since you're going to be able to use your mana every turn. And since you're playing Rhys, you're going to have things to do with your mana on other people's turns, unlike a lot of green-white decks. I'm sure everyone knows what this is, Primeval Titan. As you saw, there's no abusive lands. I'm not getting Guy's Cradle, not getting any sort of shenanigans with him, so he's just a straight-up mana ramper, but he's still worth it. It's tough to find a reason not to play Primeval Titan in green decks. He's a powerhouse. Another green powerhouse, Vorinclex. Obviously put both Praetors in here, because you can. Doubling mana, locking down other people's mana. I'd be okay if you locked down my mana. I mean, elves create enough on their own, but hey, I will take the double mana any day of the week. I do have a few X spells, so Vorinclex helps make those even better. Mirror Entity especially. Saffi. Saffi starts my recursion package. Saffi is just great. She's one of my favorite turn 2 plays outside of a mana ramp, just to keep my general cheap or to keep one of the lords in play after a Wrath. There's a lot of things you can't regenerate from even with the Zuri, so Saffi helps that out. Eternal Witness. I wish you were an elf. I really do, but you're still good enough to play. Eternal Witness, I think a green staple. It's going to be tough to find a green deck that doesn't play her. Then we have Revlark. As you've seen, most of my creatures are pretty small, so Revlark helps get most of them back. Revlark is part of the combo with Saffi, the Eternal Witness, and Mirror Entity for getting all your creatures back. So it's in there, but never gotten the combo off, never actively tutored for it. Revlark's in there because most of my creatures are small, so I like getting them back into play. Talking about small creatures and getting them back into play, there's the Sun Titan. It's only grab creatures in my experience. I really like it with Saffi. Keeps Sun Titan and Saffi in play forever. The only other thing it really grabs on a regular basis is Nim Deathmantle, again, to keep it and keep taking things out of my graveyard and putting them back into play. It's kind of the anti-Wrath tech in the deck, is Sun Titan here. And this is something new from Innistrad that I've been trying out, and I've actually been pretty happy with. Green-White doesn't have a large amount of card advantage that's based around creatures, and being able to, tap 4 mana a turn to put a 1/1 into play and draw a card, it works for me. Then you have Ranger. I've got plenty of 1-drops in the deck. This also is the anti-tuck in the deck. If they tuck Rhys, and I really need it in play for some reason, I will go ahead and grab Ranger. Otherwise, a lot of times I'm just going to be dragging Joraga Treespeaker and Heritage Druid just to help ramp for the deck. And then this guy. There's not a huge equipment theme in the deck, but he is just so good at grabbing things. There is more than 4 equipment in the deck, which is enough to play him, and he's great. I can't say enough about him. any sort of tutor that lets you keep tutoring over and over again is powerful, and he qualifies. Alright, so this is the card that goes with Oracle of Mul Daya. If you have Oracle out and this out, there are very few cards in the deck you're not going to be able to play, so it helps you just start ripping through the top of your deck and really getting those cards into play, and ignoring the need to even draw cards. So if something like Omen Machine is out for whatever reason, because I do play with a couple people that like to play Chaos decks, this is going to let you play cards anyways, even without drawing them, that you're going to dig through your deck. Athletic Slime is what I would consider another green staple creature. It gets past the Guile Dovescape, and that's important to do if you're playing any sort of blue-white decks in your area, or anything that locks down non-creature spells. Acidic Slime gets you there. We have Woodfall Primus. Yeah, he's good. Obviously with the Juniper Order Ranger, he could go infinite, but I don't have a sack outlet in here. He's not in here to go infinite. He's in here to take care of problems. Then Serra Ascendant. Feels a little cheesy, but you know what? This guy is just so good in EDH. I like to gain life. I like to swing in for damage. When damage is my primary means of winning, I need something that can beat face early. Oh, and then this guy. I wasn't really even originally planning on getting him, but with Doubling Season, he just puts so many creatures into play. He's perfect late game. Yeah, and who doesn't like Sapperlings? Sometimes you can't just all use elves. This is representing a few other token types. And representing the plants, we have Avenger of Zendikar. Obviously, Avenger of Doubling Season is ridiculous. Getting all your plants 2+1/+1 counters every time you play a land, and playing twice as many plant tokens as you have lands in play. He's great, goes perfect with the deck. He goes in a lot of green decks anyways, and with Doubling Season out, doubly powerful. Actually, quadruply powerful if you do the math on it. Green Sun Zenith, you know, tutors you can keep using over and over again. I've used it twice during a game. That's the most I've ever seen it, but always been happy to get it. I've got a lot of green targets in the deck, so it's just good. Martial Coup, one of 2 Wraths in the deck. This is the Wrath the deck really wants to be playing. It wants to get Doubling Season out, and then play this Wrath to kill all their stuff and just put a huge army of creatures into play. So Martial Coup, good Wrath spell when you've got tons of mana. Court of Calling, this is the shock and awe card. You know, you play this because people aren't used to playing things at instant speeds in your green creature-based deck, but here comes your creatures at instant speed. Scare them off pretty quick. And then Genesis Wave. Yeah, there's a bunch of mana in this deck, and a bunch of low-cost creatures too, so you can actually play Genesis Wave in this deck for surprisingly low amounts. Just doing it for 6 will generally get you 6 permanents out. So I normally wait until it's ridiculous, like playing for 20 like most people, but it does work early on. And then the other Wrath in the deck, Austere Command. This one's great because I almost always choose big creatures and either artifacts or enchantments, and just leave my whole army on board. You know, I have a few big creatures that I care about, but I actually care about my little creatures a lot more than my big creatures. And then Tooth and Nail, which I oddly enough have not gotten a chance to cast yet as I've been playing this, but I don't think I really need to explain how good Tooth and Nail is. The spell is absurd. I will almost always entwine it in this deck. Alright, Dora Destiny. This is another one of the originals that really inspired me to play this deck. Is this with Doubling Season lets you get a Coat of Arm effect after you lose your creatures. So, if you don't know, you get a +1/+1 counter every time you cast a creature of the chosen type, and all your creatures of that chosen type are going to get +1/+1 for each counter on it. So it's just a Lord that sits there throughout the Wraths, and makes it so late game your Mutavault or your Llanowar Elf are still a danger. And here we got the Eldrazi Monument, another little bit of anti-Wrath technology. Also, just a good overrun. I had a choice of overruns in the deck, and I preferred to have overruns that stayed constant instead of, the namesake itself, overrun. I'd rather have something that I can keep using than something that a fog kills off or counters. And then, of course, in a tribal deck, Coat of Arms isn't really surprising to see. Makes it so Rhys can just boost all their guys with 3 mana. Do a few combat tricks that way. The Akroma's Memorial is great. Obviously, Vigilance, Haste, Protection, Flying, First Strike. It just gives so many good abilities. If you can get to the 7 mana and you're playing a lot of creatures, this is perfect. This is even better than Lightning Greaves if you're playing hordes of creatures. Obviously, Luminar Extension, great in multiplayer, not as good one-on-one, but you know what? If you can create enough tokens, you can fog people out for a long time. Get this thing online. 2 mana for a 1/4/4 Flying Angel is great. 2 mana for 2 or 4/4/4 Flying Angels is awesome. And then using Rhys later in the game to double those tokens, whew, yeah, it's good in this one. Alright, here's something you don't see very often. I really like Seedborn Muse, and I wanted a second effect for it. The quest for renewal is just so perfect. You put counters on it when you're tapping creatures, and you get to untap all your creatures during each other player's untap phase. Oh, it's just amazing. Heritage Druid and Rhys are obviously the two things I want together for this, but I've had no problem setting this off, and generally people are just surprised to see the card. Haven't seen it in very many decks, but in this kind of deck, it's perfect. The deck people have heard of, but still takes them off guard, is the gigantic Beastmaster's Ascension. Really easy to get 7 creatures out in this deck, or even just 4 and swing twice, and having all your creatures get the boost is enormous. +5/+5 is not something you can ignore. Little creatures that you can kind of block in front of and just sweep out of the way, all of a sudden being as big as Titans, you got to do something about that. And now Aura Shards. This is another one that's just awesome with our commander, awesome with any token producers. There's so many cheap creatures in the deck. Turning them into naturalized effects is great. I probably wouldn't build another Rhys deck without Aura Shards. It's hard for me to think of a green-white deck that shouldn't be playing it. I suppose if you're playing nothing but non-token producing sorceries and such, but I'm not sure what green decks do that. For the most part, Aura Shards, solid include, all green white decks. Talk about solid includes and all green white decks. Mirari Wakes, green white X, whatever. Doubling your mana, increasing the size of your creatures, something that this deck always wants to do, always get. Skull Clamp, best equipment in the deck. Drawing 2 cards off of the tokens that you produce with Rhys is absolutely amazing. Lets you flip through and keep up with some of the decks that are more focused on drawing cards. So, always love it, always like to see it. A big Stonehewer Giant target. Now, I don't have Lightning Greaves, I do have Swiftfoot Boots. The reason being is I do have effects that target, and I would prefer to be able to target my own creatures, and every now and then I've only got 1 creature out. So, Swiftfoot Boots lets me misplay more, even though it costs 1 more mana to equip. And then my pet equipment, Nim Deathmantle. I've been putting this in almost all my EDH decks. I should probably stop. Not that it's not good, just that I think people are tired of seeing it. There's so many ways to abuse this card. Even if you're not abusing it, recursion, instant, being able to give your guys Intimidate, all good effects. If you're swinging in for damage, or if you just want to give protection from wraths to different creatures. Nim Deathmantle is a good piece of equipment. Alright, here's a good one. There are actually a lot of warriors in the deck. I don't know if you noticed when we were going through, but a lot of the elves are elf warriors. Stonehewer Giant is a warrior. Even things that aren't warriors. 3 to equip is a little much for haste, but being able to boost something and being able to equip for free to my general, I like it. Fits in well. I have another one in my Jorkadine deck now, even though it wasn't in the video I did earlier. And here's my combo piece. Ooh, Umbral Mantle. It both helps Rhys produce more tokens as he gets more mana in the late game, and it also goes infinite with either the Channeler or with Elvish Archdruid, both to make them infinite in size and to create infinite mana. And if you got anything else that taps for an effect, it'll also make them infinite in size and give you as many of that effect as you need. Then we have Argentum Armor. I included this in just because I have Stonehewer, although I have hard casted a few times and attached it. It's good for moving permanents. I'm swinging enough. I'm okay with losing tokens and throwing them out there to destroy a permanent, so it's great to have. You can do a lot of things in this deck where you're just kind of throwing your garbage creatures out there to get the tap effects for quest counters or etc. I don't really think I have to explain Sensei's Divining Top. It's in a lot of commander decks as well it should be. Very good card for digging and everything. As I said, I don't think I really need to explain that one. Alright, this guy's in here, a Johnny Goldmane, simply because I could not resist his interaction with Doubling Season. If you don't know, with Planeswalkers in Doubling Season, they don't get double counters for their plus abilities or their minus abilities or anything like that, but they do get double counters when they come into play. So when a Johnny Goldmane comes into play, he can immediately ultimate and he's still going to be on the table. So as soon as he comes into play, he can put a token into play that has power and toughness equal to your life total. Of course, that's assuming you have Doubling Season out, and since you have Doubling Season out, that means he's going to put 2 creatures into play that have power and toughness equal to your life total, which usually means you're winning either that turn or very soon. Garruk works as an overrun, works as a token producer, also lets you tap and untap Oran Reef for some funny antics. There's been a few times where I've cast the Warcaller on turn 5 or after playing Garruk and been able to put double counters on the Warcaller thanks to Garruk's ability. Obviously the overrun ability, I think people have seen Garruk a lot. He's one of the key planeswalkers in green. Always like him, and works and everywhere I want him to work. And then last but not least, we have Karn. He used to be a silver golem, now he's been liberated and he's finally recognized as a planeswalker. Never reset the game with him, never plan to. The only time I'm going to be plussing this guy is if I'm just trying to build his loyalty to let him survive attacks, or if I'm trying to get rid of a card in somebody's hand that I think is a trouble card if they've only got 1 card in hand. Generally, even if I'm playing with Doubling Season, I'm using the -3 ability to exile things. Kind of like a Spine of Ishar or Desert Twister, but getting multiple uses out of it. Thank you for watching CMDR decks. Please subscribe and favorite.